What's going on, Broncos fans? Welcome into the Broncos Breakdown by Chat Sports. Speaking of Chat Sports, we're having a debate right now. Is Kentucky in the South, and is Ohio a Midwest state or an Eastern state? Well, we'll talk about that probably not later on. But we do have some other Broncos news and rumors to cover on today's show. Plus, we'll peek at ESPN's latest 3-round mock draft, which is always good to see because you can't just do 1-round mock drafts when a quarter of the NFL doesn't have a first-round pick anymore. It's discriminatory, and it should be illegal. So we'll see who Mel Kiper and Todd McShay, as they tag team this one, who they have the Broncos picking in round 2 and 3. We'll look at the best free agents remaining going into the NFL draft, and we're going to give some love back to the people. Shout-outs at the end of the show. You guys showed out when I put out a call at the end of my last video, so we'll give some love back to all of you guys watching. But first up, the latest ESPN mock draft. We are 9 days away from the NFL draft. At this point, I just want to see a bunch of different names so that I can start mentally wrapping my brain around, could this guy be on the Broncos, right? Now, if you look at what Denver has to offer in the NFL draft, what picks they have after that big Russell Wilson trade, without the first, we know this, but they do have some firepower. They've got 3 picks in the top 100. The big saying was that they used to have 5, and they walk away with 3. And then Russell Wilson, not a bad move right there to say the least. And overall, 9 picks when you count them up together. So, who does ESPN, Todd McShay, and Mel Kiper have Denver going with at the end of round number 2? It is a corner out of Nebraska, Taylor-Britt. This is a player that we haven't seen in mock drafts in rounds 2 for most of mock draft season. Now, Taylor-Britt was a 3-year starter at corner. However, McShay thinks he's more of a safety, which is kind of interesting, but it's not uncommon to see college players make a change. I mean, Taylor-Britt, first off, college players are not what they are in high school when they get to college, but 3-year starter, and a good measuring stick when you're doing mock drafts is if you have a friend who went to that school and you're like, hey, what can you tell me about him? Well, when you ask Cornhuskers fans about Taylor-Britt, they say he's physical. That's the number one word that pops up. It's a physical corner. He doesn't have the top speed. He doesn't have the jackrabbit quickness, but he's going to get his hands on you, and he's going to make life miserable for you for 4 quarters. He's got to get better at route recognition. That's kind of his knock, his ability to understand, all right, this is what the receiver's going to do 5 yards out of the break. Now, last season for Nebraska, 29 starts, by the way, in his career, 140 tackles altogether, 6 interceptions, and 27 pass breakups. So he was a very productive player, basically a 3-year starter for Nebraska. You get that weird 2020 season, but overall, he was a very efficient player and a very reliable player on this Nebraska defense. If we learned one thing from just our very small sample size of George Paton as the Broncos GM, is he loves depth at the corner spot. Remember Kyle Fuller? That was a fun experiment for all of 0 quarters last year. But still, he drafted Surtain 9th overall. He signed Kyle Fuller. He brings on a bunch of secondary help. Ronald Darby. And by the way, it was all after drafting Ojemudia. Well, the Broncos did. 3rd round 2020. So I think we're seeing a bit of a trend here from Payton where if he wants depth, he's going to want it at the corner position. So maybe that's what Kiper, what McShay was thinking here when he picked him at the end of round 2. What position do you think the Broncos should draft first? It's kind of tough to ask who do you want them to draft first because there's 63 players that are going to go before Denver. So how about we just narrow it down to what position do you want Denver to pick when they're on the clock at number 64? Moving on to pick 75, it is the linebacker out of Wisconsin, Leo Chenal, a prototypical run-stopping linebacker who one of his biggest pros is he reads plays very well. He's got to get better in pass coverage. That's kind of why he's not with the Nakobe Deans and the Devin Lloyds of this draft class is his inability to keep up with tight ends and slot receivers over the seam. One of the most interesting things I learned about this player, by the way, he's one of 16 kids, the 12th oldest in his family. So he knows a thing or two about being a locker room player and, team mentality when you're one of 16. I don't know. It's the NFL draft. We find some weird things out about people. Last season for the Badgers, put up some good numbers, 18.5 tackles for loss, 8 sacks, and 2 forced fumbles. Listen, this is a northern Wisconsin guy. He kind of reminds me, but he's a little bit better version of Josie Jewell. I mean, you can connect the dots. Jewell went to Iowa, farm boy. You just kind of talk yourself into that when you're like Northern Wisconsin. He can probably push hay really far. So, yeah, let's give him a shot in Denver. I don't know what else to tell you. We'll look at the other mock draft picks in just a second. But who do you not want to draft? We always ask, who do you want to draft? Well, who's a player out there you're like, you know what? I wouldn't touch him with a 10-foot pole. Bust written all over him. Who do you not want the Broncos to draft? Let me know down below in the comments section. Hey, and while you're down there, follow us and subscribe at youtube.com/chatsportstv. We will be going live for all 3 days, all 7 rounds of the 2022 NFL Draft. That's the thumbnail, yep, right there. So when you see that, click on it and get the best NFL Draft coverage. It's 9 days away. Make sure you are subscribed to the mothership here, youtube.com/chatsportstv. Links in the comments and the description of today's show. Final pick in round 3 for the Broncos. They go Jelani Woods, the tight end out of Virginia. He is one of those physical specimens that GMs can just fall in love with. 6'7", 260 pounds. The issue with Woods and why he's not going early or he's not the Trey McBride of this draft class is he's only got 1 season as an actual starting tight end. He's moved around a little bit. Initially went to Oklahoma State. He was a quarterback, then became a tight end. Now, I kind of wonder, is he going to be the next Julius Thomas? Remember Thomas? Wait, that awesome size he had and that great red zone threat and target? Maybe that's what Jelani Woods can be for the Broncos. Last season for Virginia, nearly 600 yards, 8 touchdowns. He's got that red zone threat. The only issue is you just haven't seen it kind of long term. He's just been a 1-year starter. So are you going to gamble a day 2 pick on a player that's got 1 year of productivity under his belt? A bit of a risk, but tons of upside with 6'7" and 260-pound frame to throw at. All right, so that was the Broncos' final pick for ESPN in this mock draft. So let's round them all up. There they are. Taylor-Britt out of Nebraska, corner in round 2. Leo Chenal, linebacker in round 3. And Jelani Woods, tight end out of Virginia at the tail end of round number 3. So that's who McShay and Kiper picked for the Broncos in their latest 1-2 punch mock draft. And honestly, I kind of like it. So rate it for me. 1 to 100. 1 being you hate it. 100 being you love it. You are best friends with all these players and you love to see them come play your favorite team. Let me know how you would rate this mock draft down below. We move on to the second half of today's show where we look at the top free agents remaining for Denver. Not just overall because, let's face it, like as fun as it may be to talk about signing Odell Beckham Jr., the Broncos don't need a wide receiver. So we look at some names that are still out there and are rather interesting for the Broncos here. All right, first one up here, familiar face, Bryce Callahan. In fact, we got 2 familiar faces. A.J. Johnson as well. These are players we've talked about before on the show and a potential reunion with Paton and these 2 players. The issue I have is I really haven't heard much buzz from Callahan or Johnson's camp or Paton for all that matter about a potential reunion in Denver. We heard a little bit of that for other players like Kareem Jackson, and that happened. Melvin Gordon, we've heard some murmurs here and there. Haven't heard much now. Now, this could be a post-draft signing, meaning the Broncos go into the draft and say, we like this corner, we like this linebacker. If we don't get one of those guys, right, if we don't get some of our top guys, then our backup plan is just to re-sign Callahan or Johnson after the draft. However, you could also go the opposite route, right? We've signed some of these players that alleviate some of our draft needs. So those are 2 of the 5 top free agents remaining. Let's get some more on the screen here, Trace. Who else is still on the board for Denver? How about Akiem Hicks actually on the street? Defensive tackle, longtime Chicago Bear. And speaking of defensive tackle, following the Shelby Harris move, what about Sheldon Richardson, a former first-round pick? Longtime Cleveland Brown, was with the Minnesota Vikings last season. When you compare Hicks and Richardson and what they did in 2021, a little unfair because you did have Richardson play more games, but I don't know, the productivity, it benefits Akiem Hicks. These guys are both over the age of 30, so you're going to get 1, 2. You're lucky to get 3 years out of them. However, Denver doesn't need a long-time player out of these guys, right? They're looking to win right now. And an impact player like Hicks and Richardson, you squeeze a little bit of juice out of them, win a Super Bowl, and they can ride off into the sunset. So who do you want to sign? I've thrown 4 names so far at you. If you want to roll with one of them, more than happy to have you along the bandwagon. Or if I'm missing someone, you want to go a different direction, let me know who you want the Broncos to sign. 5th player that's still on the street, Kyle Van Noy. So if you've noticed a bit of a trend here, I went all defense. I just don't envision Denver going offense. They don't need help at wide receiver. They're kind of loaded at offensive line in terms of what they've done in free agency, from Billy Turner to Tom Compton to Calvin Anderson. They're going to add another tackle? I don't think so. So how about just beef up the defense a little bit more, because you got Russell Wilson. He can manage the offense. Taking a closer look at Kyle Van Noy. This was a player that broke out in the scene, right, a couple of years ago for the Patriots. Gets the bag in Miami. And then I don't know if he just said the wrong thing to the coach or whatever, but he was out after 1 season. And then like every single Patriot coach or player that fails elsewhere, he puts his tail between his legs and comes back to Foxborough, rehabs with Belichick, and that's what he did last year, 5 sacks and an interception. I don't really know where the drop-off was for Van Noy. There was some talk of, just not seeing him be able to continue what is his biggest asset, which is kind of his physical traits as he got older in his career, so that could be it. But you know what? It's the end of April right now, moving into May. There's not a ton of talent on the street, so beggars can't be choosers at this point in the free agent market. We'll wrap up the show by giving some shout-outs to all of you guys that commented me on the last Broncos Breakdown. And you know what? I did not expect to see the turnout that we had. So credit to all of you that watched to the end of the show, and let's reward you for that. So here we go. We've got a marathon of names here. Tristan, appreciate you, my guy. Richie Baez, Paul, Travis, Charles. We got Andres Hernandez, Robert, Eddie, Brenton, Tyrone, some loyal subscribers right there and frequent commenters. Nicholas, Nate, Dale, Bronk, Mark, thanks to all of you guys who commented. Joseph, Dan, Huntskill Queen, that's an interesting name. 2 Pregnant Women, sounds like a bad TBS show. Xavier Solorio. Xavier, you're an OG, my guy. Thank you so much. Stephen Morris, William, and then we have 2 Williams back-to-back. William Bromley, H2O, John, I Play Games, Caroline Russell, Giovanni, Alonzo Hernandez, Luke Method, and we home stretch here, David Youngkin, Angela P., Jacob Youngblood. Jacob Youngblood's always in the comment section. Cody, Aaron, Jedi, Alex. That is all 37 names who commented me on the previous video. An absolute franchise channel record here. So thanks to all of you guys who watched to the end of the video. Always appreciate the real ones who stick it all the way through and don't tap out after 30 seconds. We'll catch you later here on the channel with more Broncos news and rumors.